The rain had stopped just minutes before the ceremony began. James? Carter stood at his post near the entrance of the Royal British Legion Hall. His red uniform crisp and perfect, his bearskin hat steady on his head. He was 22 years old and had been a King's Guard for 8 months. This was his first time assigned to a royal event outside the palace, and he was terrified of messing it up. The hall was packed with veterans, dignitaries, and members of the royal family. Today was Remembrance Day, and Catherine, Princess of Wales, was attending to honor those who had served. James watched as people filed through the entrance, checking credentials, maintaining protocol. Everything had to be perfect. His commanding officer had made that very clear. "One mistake, Carter," Captain Morrison had said that morning. "Just one, and you're done with royal assignments." So James stood perfectly still, barely breathing, watching everything. The ceremony inside had already begun. He could hear muffled voices, the sound of a hymn being sung. Outside, a small crowd had gathered behind the barriers, hoping to catch a glimpse of the princess. Then James saw him, an elderly man in a wheelchair, struggling to navigate the wet pavement alone. He wore an old military jacket covered in medals, his hands shaking as he tried to wheel himself forward. His left leg was missing below the knee. His right arm hung useless at his side. The man was clearly a veteran, and he was clearly trying to get to the ceremony, but he was stuck. If you're watching this, hit that subscribe button now, because what happens next will restore your faith in humanity. James glanced toward the entrance. Protocol said he couldn't leave his post. Guards don't move. Guards don't break formation. Guards especially don't abandon their stations during a royal event. But the old man was struggling. His wheelchair stuck in a crack in the pavement, rainwater pooling around the wheels. James looked around. No one else was helping. The crowd behind the barriers was watching, but no one moved. The veteran tried again to push forward, his face twisted with effort and frustration. James made a decision. He stepped away from his post. Sir James called out, walking quickly toward the man. "Let me help you." The veteran looked up, surprised. His eyes were watery, his face lined with age and pain. "I don't want to be any trouble, lad." "No trouble at all, sir." James gripped the handles of the wheelchair and pulled it free from the crack. "Are you here for the ceremony?" "I am," the man said, his voice rough. "Or I was. I think I've missed most of it by now." "Then let's get you inside," James said firmly. He pushed the wheelchair toward the entrance, his heart pounding. He knew he was breaking protocol. Knew he'd probably get reprimanded. But he didn't care. They reached the entrance just as the doors opened, and standing there, framed in the doorway, was Princess Catherine. She was even more striking in person than in photographs. She wore an elegant black coat dress with a red poppy pinned to her lapel. Her expression was warm, compassionate, but right now she was looking directly at James and at the veteran in the wheelchair. James froze. His mouth went dry. "I'm sorry, Your Royal Highness," he stammered. "I was just—" Catherine held up a hand, silencing him gently. Then she smiled. "What's your name?" she asked the veteran, stepping forward. The old man looked stunned. "Thomas, ma'am." "Thomas Whitfield." "Mr. Whitfield," Catherine said warmly. "Were you hoping to attend the ceremony?" "I was, ma'am. But I'm afraid I'm too late." Catherine glanced back inside the hall, then looked at Thomas again. Her expression changed. Something determined flickered in her eyes. "You're not too late," she said softly then. She did something that made James's breath catch in his throat. "Princess?" Catherine stepped aside and gestured toward the entrance. But she didn't just gesture. She reached down, placed her hand gently on the veteran's shoulder, and said, "Mr. Whitfield, would you allow me to escort you inside personally?" The veteran's eyes filled with tears. The crowd behind the barriers fell silent, and James realized he was witnessing something extraordinary. Thomas Whitfield looked up at the princess, his weathered face filled with disbelief. "You want to escort me, ma'am?" His voice cracked. "I would be honored," Catherine said simply. She nodded to James, who carefully began pushing the wheelchair. But Catherine didn't walk ahead. She walked beside Thomas, one hand still resting gently on his shoulder, as they entered the hall. Hundreds of heads turned. The ceremony had paused. A speaker at the podium stopped mid-sentence. The entire room fell silent, watching as the Princess of Wales personally escorted a disabled veteran down the center aisle. James pushed the wheelchair slowly, acutely aware of every eye on them. His pulse hammered in his ears. He could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on him. Catherine leaned down slightly as they walked, speaking quietly to Thomas. James couldn't hear the words, but he saw the veteran's face transform. The pain and frustration melted away, replaced by something that looked like joy. They reached the front row, where a special section had been reserved for decorated veterans. But there was no space for a wheelchair. Catherine noticed immediately. She turned to one of the event coordinators, a nervous-looking woman with a clipboard. "Please make room here," Catherine said, her tone polite but firm. "Mr. Whitfield will be sitting in the front row, of course, Your Royal Highness." The coordinator immediately began moving chairs. Within moments, a space was cleared. James positioned the wheelchair carefully, making sure Thomas was comfortable. Catherine knelt down beside the veteran, bringing herself to his eye level. Several photographers raised their cameras, but she seemed oblivious to them. Her focus was entirely on Thomas. "Thank you for your service, Mr. Whitfield," she said quietly. "And thank you for being here today." Thomas's eyes brimmed with tears. "No, ma'am. Thank you." "You didn't have to do this?" "Yes," Catherine said gently. "I did." She squeezed his hand once, then stood and took her place at the front. James stepped back to the side of the hall, where the other guards and security personnel stood. His commanding officer, Captain Morrison, was glaring at him from across the room. James's stomach sank. He was in trouble. Big trouble. But as he glanced back at Thomas, sitting proudly in the front row, his medals catching the light, James couldn't bring himself to regret it. The ceremony resumed. Prayers were said. Hymns were sung. Names of fallen soldiers were read aloud. The sound of quiet weeping filled the hall. When it came time for the 2-minute silence, the room became so still that James could hear his own heartbeat. He stood at attention, thinking about Thomas. About all the veterans in this room, about the sacrifices they'd made. When the silence ended, a trumpeter played the last post. The haunting notes echoed through the hall. Then something unexpected happened, as the final note faded. Thomas Whitfield raised his one good arm in a salute. His hand trembled, but his posture was strong. Proud and Princess Catherine, standing at the front, saluted him back. It was a small gesture, subtle, but everyone in the room saw it then. From somewhere in the middle of the hall, someone began to clap. Then another person joined. Then another. Within seconds, the entire hall erupted in applause. It started as a gentle wave and built into something powerful, overwhelming. People rose to their feet. Veterans with canes struggled to stand. Men and women in uniform stood at attention, clapping. The applause went on and on. James felt a lump form in his throat. He saw veterans, wiping tears from their eyes. He saw Catherine, her own eyes glistening, smiling warmly at Thomas, and Thomas Whitfield sat in his wheelchair, his good hand covering his face, his shoulders shaking with emotion. The applause lasted for nearly 2 minutes. When it finally died down, the ceremony concluded. People began filing out slowly, many stopping to speak with Thomas, to shake his hand. To thank him, Catherine remained nearby, speaking quietly with several veterans. Taking time with each one, James stood at his post by the exit, watching it all unfold. His chest felt tight with emotion. He'd broken protocol. Yes, he'd probably be reprimanded. But seeing this moment, seeing the joy on Thomas's face, seeing the princess's compassion in action, it was worth it. As the crowd thinned, Captain Morrison approached James. His expression was stern, unreadable. "Carter," he said quietly. "A word." James's heart sank. "Yes, sir." Morrison glanced around, making sure no one was listening. Then he leaned in close. "You left your post," he said. "Yes, sir." "I did." Morrison's jaw tightened. For a moment, James thought he was about to be torn apart. Then the captain's expression softened, just slightly. "And you did the right thing," Morrison said quietly. "Sometimes, Carter, being a good guard means being a good human being first." "Sir, you made the call that mattered," Morrison continued. "And because of you, that veteran got to experience something he'll never forget." He paused. "Well done." Before James could respond, Morrison turned and walked away. James stood there, stunned, trying to process what had just happened. Then he heard a voice behind him. "Guardsman." James turned. Princess Catherine was standing there, a gentle smile on her face, and his entire world tilted. James immediately snapped to attention, his back rigid, his eyes forward. "Your Royal Highness," he said, trying to keep his voice steady. Catherine's smile didn't fade. "At ease," she said gently. "What's your name?" "James Carter, ma'am." "James," she repeated, as if testing the name. "You're the one who helped Mr. Whitfield, aren't you?" James swallowed. "Yes, ma'am." "I apologize if I don't apologize," Catherine interrupted softly. She stepped closer, her expression warm. "What you did was kind. And kindness should never require an apology." James felt his throat tighten. "Thank you, ma'am." Catherine glanced back toward the hall, where Thomas was still surrounded by well-wishers. "Do you know Mr. Whitfield's story?" "No, ma'am." "He served in the Falklands War," Catherine said quietly. "He lost his leg saving 3 men from a burning vehicle. Lost the use of his arm from shrapnel." She paused. "He's been coming to these ceremonies for 40 years. He's never missed one." James felt something twist in his chest. "He's a hero." "He is," Catherine agreed. "And today, because of you, he was treated like one." Before James could respond, an aide approached and whispered something to Catherine. She nodded, then turned back to James. "I have to go," she said. "But thank you, James, for seeing what needed to be done. And for doing it." She extended her hand. James hesitated for only a fraction of a second before shaking it. Her grip was warm and firm. "It was an honor, ma'am." Catherine smiled once more, then turned and walked toward the waiting car. Her security detail fell into formation around her, and moments later, she was gone. James stood there, his hands still tingling from the handshake, trying to process everything that had just happened. "She's something, isn't she?" James turned to see Thomas wheeling himself over, a wide smile on his face. "Mr. Whitfield," James said quickly. "Do you need help getting to?" "I'm fine, lad," Thomas said, waving him off. "I wanted to thank you. Properly." "You don't need to thank me, sir." "Yes, I do." Thomas's expression grew serious. "I almost didn't come today. I woke up this morning and thought, what's the point? No one remembers. No one cares. But you cared. And she cared." His voice cracked slightly. "You reminded me why I still put on this uniform every year." James felt his eyes burn. "Sir, you're a good lad, James Carter," Thomas said firmly. "Don't let anyone tell you different." He reached up and gripped James's hand with surprising strength. Then he wheeled himself away. Heading toward a group of other veterans who were waiting for him, James watched him go, feeling something shift inside him. Something important. The rest of the afternoon passed in a blur. James returned to his post, finished his shift, and returned to barracks. But his mind kept returning to the ceremony, to Thomas. To Catherine's words. That evening, as James was changing out of his uniform, one of the other guards burst into the room, phone in hand. "Carter, have you seen this?" "Seen what?" The guard shoved the phone in his face. On the screen was a video. James recognized it immediately. It was footage from the ceremony. The video showed Catherine walking beside Thomas, her hand on his shoulder. It showed the moment she knelt beside him. The salute. The standing ovation, and it had millions of views. "You're in it too," the guard said, grinning. "Right there, pushing the wheelchair. People are calling you the compassionate guard." James felt his stomach drop. Oh no, oh no. "Mate, this is brilliant. Everyone's talking about it." Princess Kate's touching moment with disabled veteran. Guard breaks protocol to help hero James grabbed the phone and scrolled through the Comments. This made me cry. Faith in humanity. Restored, the guard and the princess both showed what true service looks like. Wait, we need more people like this in the world. There were thousands of comments. Tens of thousands. And they were all overwhelmingly positive. James handed the phone back, his mind reeling. This is insane. Insane? The guard laughed. Mate, you're famous. In a good way. But James didn't feel famous. He felt exposed, vulnerable. Over the next few days, the video continued to spread. News outlets picked it up. It was featured on morning shows. Royal commentators praised both Catherine and James for their actions. James tried to ignore it. He went about his duties, kept his head down, and avoided social media. But the attention didn't stop. One morning, he received a message through official channels. He was being summoned to Kensington Palace. James's heart nearly stopped. Why? Doesn't say, Captain Morrison told him. But I'd polish your boots if I were you. The next day, James found himself standing outside Kensington Palace, wearing his dress uniform. His palms sweating, an aide led him through the elegant corridors, past portraits and priceless artwork. They stopped outside a sitting room. Her Royal Highness will see you now, the aide said. Opening the door, James stepped inside. The room was warm and inviting, with comfortable furniture and natural light streaming through the windows. And sitting on one of the sofas was Princess Catherine. Dressed casually in a simple blouse and trousers, she stood when he entered, smiling. James, she said warmly. Thank you for coming, Your Royal Highness, James managed, bowing slightly. Sit. She gestured to the chair across from her. James sat, his back straight. His hands on his knees, Catherine poured tea from a pot on the table. Would you like some? Yes, thank you, ma'am. She handed him a cup, then settled back into her seat. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then Catherine said, I imagine you've seen the video. James nodded. Yes, ma'am. And you've probably been wondering why I asked you here. Yes, ma'am. Catherine set down her teacup and looked at him directly. Her expression was kind but serious. James, I wanted to talk to you about something important, she said. About what happened that day, and about what it means. James held his teacup carefully, waiting for her to continue. Catherine leaned forward slightly. That moment at the ceremony, it wasn't just about Mr. Whitfield, as important as he is. It was about something bigger. Ma'am? It was about remembering that behind every uniform, every medal, every title, there's a human being, Catherine said softly. You saw a man who needed help, and you helped him. Not because it was your duty, but because it was the right thing to do. James nodded slowly. I just couldn't stand there and watch him struggle, ma'am. Exactly, Catherine said. And that's what I wanted to talk to you about. She paused, choosing her words carefully. The video has been seen by millions of people, and I've been thinking about why it resonated so deeply. Why do you think it did, ma'am? Because people are hungry for moments of genuine compassion, Catherine said. In a world that often feels cold and indifferent. Seeing someone break protocol to help another person, seeing humanity triumph over rules, it gives people hope. James felt his chest tighten. I never meant for it to become such a big thing. I know, Catherine said gently. But it has. And I believe we have an opportunity here. To do something meaningful with this attention. Now, what do you mean? Catherine set down her teacup and clasped her hands. I've been working with several veterans' charities. Organizations that help former service members who are struggling with housing, with medical care, with mental health. They do incredible work, but they're always underfunded and overlooked. James listened intently. Since the video went viral, Catherine continued. Those charities have seen a surge in donations and volunteer applications. People watched that moment and wanted to do something. They wanted to help. That's wonderful, ma'am. It is, Catherine agreed. But I think we can do more. She met his eyes. I'd like to invite Mr. Whitfield and several other veterans to a special event at Kensington Palace. A celebration of their service. And I'd like you to be there. James blinked. Me, ma'am. Yes, Catherine said with a warm smile. You were part of that moment. You helped create it. And I think your presence would mean a great deal to the veterans. I'd be honored, James said quietly. Good. Catherine's smile widened. There's one more thing. I'd like this event to launch a new initiative, a program to connect young people with veterans, to create mentorship opportunities and support networks. I think you'd be perfect to help lead it. James's mind reeled. I don't know if I'm qualified. You're more qualified than you think, Catherine interrupted gently. You have something that can't be taught. You have heart. You have compassion. And you have the courage to act on it. James felt overwhelmed. Thank you, ma'am. I don't know what to say. Say yes, Catherine said simply. James looked at her, at a genuine warmth in her expression, and felt something settle in his chest. Yes, he said. Absolutely yes. Catherine's smile was radiant. Wonderful. My team will be in touch with the details. She stood, and James quickly followed suit. Thank you, James, for everything. As James left Kensington Palace that afternoon, his head was spinning. He'd gone from being a nervous young guard to someone involved in a royal initiative. It felt surreal, but it also felt right. Over the next 2 weeks, James threw himself into preparation for the event. He worked with Catherine's team, helped coordinate with veterans organizations, and even reached out to Thomas Whitfield personally to invite him. Thomas had laughed with joy over the phone. Another chance to wear my medals, eh? Count me in, lad. The day of the event arrived. Kensington Palace was transformed elegant, but welcoming, with displays honoring different regiments and wars. 50 veterans had been invited, along with their families. James stood near the entrance in his dress uniform, greeting guests as they arrived. He saw faces young and old, men and women who had served in conflicts from World War II to Afghanistan. And then Thomas arrived. He wheeled himself through the entrance, wearing his military jacket polished to perfection, his medals gleaming. But this time, he wasn't alone. His daughter pushed his wheelchair, and his 2 grandchildren walked beside him, faces full of pride. James. Thomas called out, his face lighting up. James rushed over. Mr. Whitfield, I'm so glad you could make it. Wouldn't miss it for the world. Thomas gestured to his family. This is my daughter, Margaret. And these are my grandchildren, Sophie and Daniel. James shook hands with each of them. The children stared at him in awe. Are you the guard from the video? Sophie asked, her eyes wide. James smiled. I am, you're famous, Daniel exclaimed. I'm just doing my job, James said gently. No, Margaret said, her voice thick with emotion. You gave my father something precious. You gave him dignity, respect. You reminded the world that veterans like him matter. James felt his throat tighten. Your father's a hero, ma'am. He deserves all the respect in the world. Margaret squeezed his hand. Thank you. As more guests arrived, the palace filled with laughter and conversation. Veterans shared stories, reconnected with old comrades, and met younger service members who looked up to them. Then Princess Catherine arrived. The room fell quiet as she entered, but she immediately put everyone at ease. She moved through the crowd, speaking with each veteran personally, asking about their service, their families, their lives. James watched from the side, amazed by her warmth and genuine interest. She wasn't just going through the motions, she truly cared. When Catherine reached Thomas, she knelt beside his wheelchair again, just like she had at the ceremony. Mr. Whitfield, she said warmly. It's wonderful to see you again, Your Royal Highness, Thomas said, beaming. Thank you for this. For all of this. Thank you for being here, Catherine replied. And for bringing your beautiful family? She spoke with them for several minutes, asking the children about school, complimenting Margaret on raising such wonderful kids. Then Catherine stood and addressed the room. I want to thank each and every one of you for being here today, she said, her voice clear and strong. You've served this country with courage and sacrifice, and too often, that service goes unrecognized. But not today. She paused, her gaze sweeping across the faces in the room. Today we honor you. We thank you. And we commit to supporting you, not just with words, but with action. Catherine continued, her voice filled with conviction. A few weeks ago, something remarkable happened at a Remembrance Day ceremony. A young guard saw someone in need and chose compassion over protocol. And that single act reminded us all of what truly matters. She gestured toward James, who felt his face flush as everyone turned to look at him. James Carter didn't hesitate, Catherine said. He saw a veteran struggling, and he helped. That moment sparked something. It reminded millions of people that we have a responsibility to those who served us. Not just to thank them, but to support them. The room was silent, everyone hanging on her words. That's why today marks the launch of the Veterans Bridge Initiative, Catherine announced. A program that will connect young people with veterans, creating mentorship opportunities, providing support services, and ensuring that no veteran ever feels forgotten. Applause erupted. Thomas raised his good arm and pumped his fist. Other veterans wiped tears from their eyes. Catherine smiled, waiting for the applause to die down. And I'm pleased to announce that James Carter has agreed to serve as the program's youth ambassador. More applause, even louder this time. James felt overwhelmed, humbled, incredibly grateful all at once. Catherine caught his eye and gave him an encouraging nod. After her speech, the event continued with refreshments and conversation. James found himself surrounded by veterans wanting to talk, to share their stories, to thank him. An elderly woman approached him, her eyes bright despite her age. My husband served in Korea, she said. He passed away 5 years ago. But if he were here today, he'd shake your hand and tell you that you represent the best of this generation. Thank you, ma'am. That means everything. A younger veteran, probably only a few years older than James, clapped him on the shoulder. Afghanistan, 2 tours, the man said. Lost 3 mates over there. Coming back was hard, still is. But seeing people like you and the princess actually care, it helps, mate. It really does. James gripped the man's hand. If you ever need anything, I'm here. I know, the veteran said with a genuine smile. That's the point, isn't it? As the afternoon wore on, James noticed Thomas sitting alone by one of the windows, looking out at the gardens. James walked over and sat beside him. Quite the day, James said. Thomas nodded slowly. Quite the day indeed. He was quiet for a moment. You know, lad, when I came back from the Falklands, I was angry, bitter. I'd lost my leg. My arm was useless. And I felt like the country had forgotten about us the moment the war ended. James listened, saying nothing. For years I carried that anger, Thomas continued. But then I started going to these ceremonies, seeing other veterans, remembering why we served in the first place. He turned to look at James. We didn't serve for the glory. We served because we believed in something bigger than ourselves. Yes, sir. And what you did, what the princess did, reminded me that the best of us still believe in that, Thomas said, his voice thick with emotion. You reminded me that kindness hasn't died, that compassion still exists. James felt tears prick his eyes. You're the one who inspired all of this, Mr. Whitfield. Your service, your sacrifice. Thomas shook his head. We're all in this together, lad. That's what I've learned. Old or young, civilian or military, royal or common, we're all in this together. And when we remember that, when we help each other, that's when we're at our best. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the other guests mingle and laugh. Princess Catherine approached them, a warm smile on her face. May I join you? Of course, Your Royal Highness, Thomas said. Catherine sat on Thomas's other side. For a moment, the 3 of them simply sat together, watching the celebration unfold. This is what it's all about, isn't it? Catherine said softly. Connection, community, taking care of one another? Yes, ma'am, James agreed. My grandmother served during the war, Catherine said. She always told me that the true measure of a society is how it treats its most vulnerable, its elderly, its veterans, its children. I've never forgotten that. Thomas nodded. Wise woman, she was, Catherine said with a sad smile. I wish she could see this. See what's being built here? She'd be proud of you, ma'am, Thomas said. Very proud. Catherine's eyes glistened. Thank you. They sat together a while longer, 3 people from different worlds, united by a shared moment of compassion. As the event began to wind down, guests started saying their goodbyes. James helped Thomas and his family to their car, making sure they had everything they needed. "Will I see you again, lad?" Thomas asked. "Absolutely," James promised. "I'll be working with the new program, and I'd love to have you involved if you're willing." Thomas grinned. "Just try and stop me." They shook hands once more, and James watched as Thomas's family drove away. Feeling a deep sense of connection and purpose, Catherine approached him as he stood on the palace steps. "How are you feeling?" she asked. James took a deep breath. "Honestly, overwhelmed, but in the best possible way." Catherine smiled. "Good, because this is just the beginning." "What do you mean?" "The work we're doing with this initiative, it's going to make a real difference," Catherine said. "But it requires dedication, compassion, people who genuinely care." She looked at him directly. "People like you, James, I won't let you down, ma'am." "I know you won't," Catherine said confidently, "because you've already proven what kind of person you are. You saw someone in need and you helped. That's the foundation of everything else." James felt a surge of determination. "I want to do more. I want to help as many veterans as possible." "You will," Catherine assured him. "But remember, you can't help everyone all at once. Sometimes helping one person is enough to change everything." James thought about Thomas, about the joy on his face today, about the tears in his eyes at the ceremony. "Yes, ma'am," James said. "I understand." Catherine extended her hand once more. "Thank you, James, for your service, for your heart, and for reminding us all what truly matters." As James shook her hand, he realized that his life had changed completely in just a few short weeks. He'd gone from being a nervous young guard worried about making mistakes to someone making a real difference. And it all started with one simple choice: to help. 6 months later, James stood in front of a small community center in Leeds, waiting for his first official mentorship session. The Veterans Bridge initiative had grown beyond anyone's expectations. What started as one moment of compassion had sparked a nationwide movement. Thousands of young people had signed up to volunteer. Donations had poured in. Support centers were opening across the country, and James was at the heart of it. He'd taken a leave from active guard duty to focus on the program full-time. It had been a difficult decision, but Captain Morrison had supported him completely. "You're serving your country in a different way now," Morrison had said. "That's nothing to be ashamed of." Today, James was meeting with 5 veterans who needed support and 5 young volunteers who'd signed up to help. It was his job to facilitate the connections, to help build bridges between generations. He was nervous, but he was ready. The door opened, and people began filing in. James recognized some faces from the Kensington Palace event. Others were new. Young volunteers arrived, eyes bright with enthusiasm. Veterans came in slowly, some using canes, others in wheelchairs, all wearing their service with quiet pride. And then James saw Thomas wheel himself through the door, a huge grin on his face. "Mr. Whitfield?" James exclaimed. "I didn't know you were coming. Did you think I'd missed your first session?" Thomas laughed. "Besides, I signed up as a mentor myself. Figured I've got a few stories to share." James felt his chest swell with emotion. "That's amazing." Over the next 2 hours, James facilitated introductions, helped match veterans with volunteers, and listened to incredible stories of service and sacrifice. He watched as a 19-year-old university student connected with a Vietnam veteran, their conversation flowing naturally despite the decades between them. He saw an elderly woman who'd served as a nurse in the Falklands share her experiences with a young paramedic, and he watched Thomas, surrounded by young people hanging on his every word, talking about courage and resilience and finding your purpose after trauma. This was what it was all about. At the end of the session, as people were leaving, a young woman approached James. She couldn't have been more than 17. With nervous eyes and fidgeting hands. "Excuse me," she said quietly. "Are you James Carter?" "I am." "I just wanted to say thank you," she said, her voice shaking slightly. "My grandfather was a veteran. He died last year, and I never really got to hear his stories. I always regretted that." She wiped her eyes. "But today, Listening to Mr. Whitfield and the others, I feel like I got a second chance. Like I got to hear what my grandfather might have said. James felt his throat tighten. What was your grandfather's name? Robert Mills. He served in Northern Ireland. He sounds like a remarkable man. He was, she said, smiling through her tears. And because of this program, I feel closer to him now than I have since he died. James didn't know what to say. He simply pulled her into a gentle hug, and she cried softly against his shoulder. When she pulled away, she was smiling. Thank you for everything you're doing. She left. James stood there, overwhelmed by the weight and beauty of the moment. "We be okay," Thomas said, wheeling up beside him. "I know," James said. "It's just ... I never imagined all of this. That one moment could lead to something so big." "That's the thing about kindness, lad," Thomas said wisely. "It ripples out. Touches people you'll never meet. Changes lives you'll never see." James nodded, understanding. Over the following months, the program continued to grow. James traveled across the country, setting up new chapters, training volunteers, and hearing story after story of connection and healing. He received letters from veterans, thanking him for giving them purpose again. He got messages from young people who'd found direction and meaning through their relationships with veterans. He saw communities come together in ways they hadn't in decades. And through it all, James stayed in regular contact with Thomas. They spoke on the phone weekly. Thomas attended every major event, and slowly the old veteran became more than a mentor or an inspiration. He became family. One evening, James received a call from Margaret, Thomas's daughter. "It's Dad," she said, her voice worried. "He's in the hospital. It's his heart." James's stomach dropped. "Is he okay?" "He's stable, but it was serious. He's asking for you. I'm on my way." James drove through the night, arriving at the hospital just before dawn. Margaret met him in the waiting room, exhausted but grateful. "He's resting now, but he wants to see you when he wakes up." James sat in the waiting room for hours, his mind racing. He thought about that first day, seeing Thomas struggling in the rain. He thought about the ceremony, the palace event, all the conversations they'd had since. He couldn't imagine a world without Thomas Whitfield in it. Finally, nurse came to get him. "He's awake. You can go in." James entered the hospital room quietly. Thomas looked small in the bed, tubes and wires connected to him, but his eyes were alert and bright. "There's my favorite guard," Thomas said with a weak smile. James rushed to his bedside. "Don't scare me like that. Sorry, lad. Ticker's not what it used to be." Thomas reached out with his good hand, and James took it. "But I'm not done yet. Still got work to do?" "You need to rest," James said firmly. "I will. But first, I need to tell you something." Thomas's expression grew serious. "You changed my life, James. That day in the rain, I was at my lowest. I felt forgotten, useless, and you saw me. Really saw me." "Mr. Whitfield, let me finish," Thomas interrupted gently. "You gave me back my dignity, my purpose. And not just me, thousands of veterans across this country now have that same gift because of you." James felt tears streaming down his face. "You're the one who inspired all of this." "Maybe," Thomas said, "but you're the one who made it real. And I'm proud of you, lad. Prouder than I can say." They sat in silence for a moment, hands clasped. "You're going to be okay," James said, his voice thick. "You have to be. The program needs you. I need you." Thomas smiled. "I'm not going anywhere yet. I've got grandchildren to spoil and young people to mentor. Death can wait." And he meant it. Thomas recovered and was discharged a week later. He returned to the program with renewed energy, and his story of survival became another source of inspiration. Years passed. The Veterans Bridge Initiative became one of the most successful veterans programs in the country. James eventually returned to guard duty part-time, balancing his military service with his work for the program. Princess Catherine remained involved, attending events, meeting with veterans, and using her platform to keep the initiative in the public eye. and Thomas Whitfield became a national treasure. He was interviewed on television, invited to speak at schools, and received numerous honors for his service and his advocacy. Through it all, he and James remained close. One crisp autumn day, James stood once again at the Royal British Legion Hall for another Remembrance Day ceremony. But this time, he wasn't just a guard. He was a speaker. He stood at the podium, looking out at hundreds of faces, veterans, families, volunteers, dignitaries, and in the front row sat Thomas, wearing his medals. His daughter and grandchildren beside him. Princess Catherine sat nearby. Listening intently, James took a deep breath and began. 5 years ago, I made a choice. It wasn't a difficult choice, but it was an important one. I saw someone who needed help, and I helped him. He gestured to Thomas. That man, Thomas Whitfield, is a hero. He served his country with courage and sacrifice. But more than that, he taught me what service truly means. James paused, his voice growing stronger. Service isn't just about wearing a uniform or following orders. It's about seeing someone in need and choosing to act. It's about compassion, connection, and remembering that we're all in this together. He looked at Catherine, who smiled encouragingly. Today, we honor all those who've served, James continued. But we also commit to something more. We commit to never forgetting, never overlooking, never allowing any veteran to struggle alone and unseen. The crowd erupted in applause. As James stepped down from the podium, Thomas wheeled up to him, tears streaming down his weathered face. Proud of you, lad, Thomas said. So damn proud. James knelt beside him, just like Catherine had done all those years ago. Thank you, James said quietly, for everything. They embraced, and the crowd's applause grew even louder. In that moment, surrounded by people whose lives had been touched by one act of kindness, James understood the true power of compassion. It didn't just change. It's one life. It changed everything. And it all started with a choice. The choice to see someone struggling, and the choice to help.